Welcome to our Ask Me Any session. Any question session. I'm Jaime, Sustainable Markets Professional at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, the creators of the Fairmine Label, and we are thrilled to have you with us today. I'm excited to introduce our special guest, Allison Charalambous, the Vice President of Responsible Sourcing and Sustainability at Brilliant Earth, a leader in ethically sourced fine jewelry. Allison will be sharing insights from her recent trip to Madre de Dios in Peru, where she visited the first 4 mines in the Amazon to achieve the Fair Mine certification. These mines, despite facing the immense challenge the region is known for, like deforestation and mercury use, have made remarkable progress thanks to the support from Brilliant Earth and Pure Earth. So please send your questions directly to me or Cristina, as this is your chance to engage directly with Allison on all things responsible sourcing and sustainability. So let's start and let's welcome our guest, Allison.
Thanks,
How
Jaime.
are you?
Thank you very much. I'm very good. Thank you. Appreciate you guys carving out this time for us to talk about this trip. I want to introduce Cristina Villegas, the Director of Sustainable Jewelry at PACT. I asked Cristina to moderate this conversation because I consider her both a colleague and a collaborator. We work together on the Moyo Gems program in Kenya, which is a colored gemstone program mainly focused on female artisanal small-scale miners. And I wanted her to bring her extensive mine to market experience to the presentation and to the questions that we developed here. I've also asked Rodrigo Velarde, Pure Earth's country manager based out of Lima, to join the presentation a little bit later on in the slides. And I'm going to pause and hand it over to Cristina right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really delighted to be here. Gold is most likely it is the most complicated material in jewelry. I think Madre de Dios is most likely it is the most complicated situation in the world involving gold. Today's discussion is going to be very interesting because we're talking about how to possibly engage responsibly in a really complicated place with a really complicated material. If you have questions, you can put those in the chat or in the Q&A. So if you go to the top of your screen, there's a little Q&A icon. And so you can put your questions there and I will see them. And so at the end of the presentation, we'll spend a considerable amount of time going over those questions. I have some prepared questions for Allison, and we'll talk about her recent trip to Peru and Madre de Dios, and we'll talk about the situation there and how Brilliant Earth is choosing to engage. And then we'll get to your questions. So Allison, to begin, can you talk about Brilliant Earth's connection to Fairmine and Pure Earth? What is Fairmine and who is Pure Earth?
Yeah, we began working with Fairmine in 2015. We became an authorized Fairmine retailer, which means that we're permitted to purchase the Fairmine chain of custody gold from other certified supply chain actors, such as certified miners, refiners, and manufacturers, and put it into our product. We launched a Fairmine Gold for Good collection, the one that you see here, in 2021. We've been adding styles to that collection year over year since, and just this past year, we added choices for wedding bands and engagement rings in Fairmine Gold. And then in parallel, in 2016, we started working with Pure Earth, but more from a philanthropic perspective. We were making small contributions to their programs in Madre de Dios, and when we established the Brilliant Earth Foundation in 2021 and injected it with the first $1 million, we were committed to making a long-term grant to Pure Earth, and so we set up a 4-year grant to invest in their mercury-free mining techniques, their reforestation programs, and to get the mines in AMATAF, the AMATAF mines in Madre de Dios, Fair Mine certified. And so that's how those two relationships began.
So now let's talk about the place. Why is it called Madre de Dios? And why is it so complicated?
So this right here is Madre de Dios. It's a rainforest. The literal translation of the name is Mother of God. It's named after the Madre de Dios River, which is a tributary off of the Amazon. Under Peruvian law, it's considered the capital of biodiversity. It's 2 times the size of Costa Rica. It holds 1/6 of all plant life in the world, takes second place for reptile diversity, and it's also the home of peoples who still live in isolation. And it's complicated because it's a place of a modern day gold rush. This was fueled by the '08 economic crisis, the continual rise in gold prices, and that interoceanic highway that you see there in the photo, which connects Peru to Brazil. So just to give you kind of a practical example of the push of internal migration or the draw of individuals to the region for mining opportunities. Previously, there just used to be one daily flight from Lima to Puerto Maldonado, which is the largest town in Madre de Dios. And now there are 3 daily flights into Puerto Maldonado. And Puerto Maldonado does service some ecotourism, but it mostly services the mining communities who are working there in Madre de Dios.
Yeah, I've actually taken one of those flights. I was there with my dad. We do an annual father-daughter trip, and I went into Madre de Dios, but I did not say what I do. I did not want anybody to know I work on responsible mining. I just wanted to observe what was happening, and it was really interesting, the tension between artisanal mining and tourism, and just to observe that there were miners on the river that we were taking a canoe up. So how is Brilliant Earth choosing to engage, and why?
So, as fine jewelers, we just simply can't turn a blind eye to the fact that global jewelry industry is the largest consumer of gold, and that's followed by financial institutions, central banks, and the tech sector. And this global demand really fuels that deforestation and mercury use that's so widely associated with Madre de Dios and in the Amazon more broadly. In Peru in particular, surprisingly, mercury is still legal to use, and that's despite the fact that Peru signed the Minamata Convention on Mercury in 2016. Small-scale miners use mercury to process their gold, oftentimes without personal protective equipment. They burn it, it's released into the atmosphere, it's released into waterways, and it accumulates in seafood. And when I spoke to miners when I was there, I was really very surprised to see the poor level of education around mercury being a toxic chemical. Many are not aware that they shouldn't handle it without PPE. They're not aware of what the symptoms of mercury poisoning are, and they don't know how to avoid it in food, or that they should even avoid it in food.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. That there's a couple things you said. The Minamata Convention is this global mercury treaty, and it is trying to reduce mercury use across a number of industries. But artisanal gold mining is the #1 user and polluter of mercury in the world. Beyond coal-fired power plants, beyond anyone else, it is artisanal gold miners. But as you mentioned, they don't often know that it's poisoning them and their families and the environment. Oftentimes, someone just hands it to them and says, hey, this will help you get more gold out of this pile of sand that you're working with. And no one tells them that it's actually poisoning them. So that's a key point that I think you raised, is they don't, that they often villainize, but they don't always know that what they're doing, or that it's killing themselves and hurting their families. So thank you for raising that point. Now, part of the point of his talk was to kind of walk us through your recent trip to Madre de Dios. Maybe you can talk about that trip and what you saw.
Yeah, Happy to do that. I was fortunate to be able to visit Madre de Dios in the AMATAF mines just this past July. And I traveled with a group from Pure Earth and Alliance for Responsible Mining. So I traveled with Jen Maraschino, the Senior Development Director at Pure Earth, Rodrigo Valverde, who I just introduced earlier, as well as two local coordinators, Franz Cabanillas, the local coordinator of Madre de Dios, and his project coordinator, Sofia Lopez. And this right here is Ruth Arpasi from Alliance for Responsible Mining. And this small but very mighty woman is Vilma Contreras. She's the president of the AMATAF mines. There are 4 concessions in AMATAF, or sorry, excuse me, there are 11 concessions in AMATAF. 4 of them are Fair Mines certified. And what that means is that they process their gold without the use of mercury. They use a shaking table, and they ecologically close out their mines when they're done. So I had seen plenty of photos of the deforestation of Madre de Dios through, online research, annual reports from Pure Earth, films that I had seen, research reports, etc. So I was really familiar with it, but I didn't think that it would hit me the way that it did when I saw it from the air. So when you're flying out of Lima, you fly over the Peruvian Andes, which are these like very dry, jagged, aggressively jagged rock-like mountain ranges with these blue-green glacier pools underneath. And then suddenly like the terrain changes and you start to see that classic image of the rainforest canopy, which is a green carpet with those Amazonian rivers snaking through. And there was some cloud cover as I was traveling, and I couldn't quite make out or understand what I was seeing until the cloud cover parted. And I realized I wasn't seeing lakes, because that's not what you see in the Amazon. I was seeing man-made mining pools caused from deforestation and the use of mercury. And I was so shocked. I was filming with my phone. I would then stop, and then I'd see that it just continued. And so I'd start filming again, and then I would stop. And the most shocking thing to me was that we were flying, it just kept going and going and going. And it was really incredibly heartbreaking. And I was just overwhelmed by the level of devastation. And I just, I don't know, there's really no words to put towards being able to see the expanse of that from the plane. But surprisingly, despite this heartbreak that I felt, I didn't leave the region feeling dejected. And that was because of the very interpersonal experience that I had meeting the AMATAF mines. I'm based out of Los Angeles, so from my home office in LA, it's really hard to understand the actual on-the-ground impact that you're having through these grant programs. You read the annual reports, you see the figures of impact, you see that your grant partners have met their milestones. You have all of that understanding, but you really just don't know how the individuals who are in those programs are responding to those trainings or those new opportunities. And not until I got there did I really understand the time and effort investment that these small scale miners were making. And that was starkly contrasting next to the day-to-day obstacles that they have to overcome to maintain a responsible gold mining model. So just starting off with this carguero, in the region we're in, they don't allow full-size vehicles, so you have to travel by motorcycle, or this carguero, which is effectively a motorcycle with a flatbed on the back. And for these AMATAF miners, because they don't process their gold with mercury, they take it to a shaking table or a processing plant where a shaking table is located. They need to travel by carguero for about an hour or an hour and a half along a path like this. And they're carrying buckets of wet sand. So I don't know if you guys ever self-leveled the floor in your own home. Carrying buckets of cement is really very challenging. And they do this on a daily basis so that they don't process their gold with mercury in the rainforest, but instead on that shaking table. Here's an example of a shaking table. So what really became very clear to me during the trip was their level of professionalism. These are not prospectors. These are individuals who are willing to make a financial investment, and they're in it for the long run. These are concession holders who had to fight for years to get illegal miners off of their concessions so they could get those concessions back. And they are really committed to doing this the right way. They're committed to mining responsibly. So this is what gold looks like when you process it without mercury.
Yeah, and let's just take a step back for a moment. I know that you have not been in jewelry your entire career. And so I wanted to ask you, before you came to jewelry, how would you have defined responsibility in mining as a newcomer? And now that you've been to the field and you've interacted with people like me as well, how do you understand that conversation now? Now that you've been there?
Yeah. So I actually come from apparel, and the first eyes wide open experience at Brilliant Earth was the depth and breadth of our traceability programs. So what we do at Brilliant Earth far surpasses what I experienced in apparel, and what I would say broadly the industry in apparel is just tracing back to their apparel factories, their cut sew factories. But at Brilliant Earth, it's really important for us to trace back all the way to the raw material. We have that through our Beyond Conflict Free commitment. We have that through this AMATAF grant, the Moyo Gems program that we work together on through PACT. And when I started my research on Madre de Dios, when I joined Brilliant Earth, I was hearing these kind of very black and white terms of legal and illegal, sometimes formal and informal, and I didn't fully understand the nuances of all those definitions until, I got there in July. And actually, Cristina, I think this is a good point. I would love for you to speak about all the gray areas of legal, illegal, formal, informal, illicit, et cetera.
Yeah, it's really important to distinguish, legal, illegal, and what we mean by that, and why we use the word formal and informal instead of the word illegal, and why sometimes I use the word criminal mining when it's actually deserved. So the word illegal miner, I actually don't use that word very often because the law can be used as a weapon. It can be used and often is used as a weapon against some of the most vulnerable people in the world. And so I often use the word informal because to be legal is not always available to people because the laws is not written in a way like it doesn't actually acknowledge artisanal mining. So it's not possible to actually do it legally because it's not actually written in the law, even though it's happening all around them. Or you have to bribe someone in order to get the permit, which is no matter, that's not socially just at all. Or they preference large-scale mining, or those large-scale miners have bribed whoever to get the permits, and things like that. So I use the word illegal and criminal mining only when those groups are backed by kind of illegal international criminal syndicates. So like drug cartels, so international terrorist funding. And so unfortunately, those folks are present in Madre de Dios. Let's not shy away from that. Those folks are present there, and they are funding illegal criminal miners to come in and do terrible things in this area. But there are also people like those miners who are working to pursue the Fair Mine certification, who are there for the long term, who were born in this place, who are dedicated to the environment, who are pursuing formality, and who are choosing to do the right thing. They might be informal now, but they're pursuing formality. So that's why I'm really careful about language. I don't like to use the word illegal because it can be weaponized. And that's why I'm very careful when I say criminal mining, because that's what it is in some cases. So in this case, the Fair Mind miners are absolutely doing the right thing. Brilliant Earth is supporting them. Their customers are supporting the right thing. And I think that needs to be celebrated. So thank you for clarifying something I really cared really deeply about. So thank you for my brief soapbox moment on that one. But let's just talk about some of the debate on how to engage with gold mining, because if folks know me well, they know I do like to talk about kind of uncomfortable issues sometimes. Understanding the risks of gold. Could someone argue that recycled gold is a more ethical choice? What would you say to that?
Well, as a brand, we do source primarily recycled gold. And we source it from a very short list of approved refiners who hold certifications to process recycled content. And that's in addition to their responsibility certifications that they hold. But we do understand as a brand that we are not actually changing the global demand for gold. Like I mentioned previously, writ large, that's the jewelry industry that's driving that demand, followed by financial institutions, central banks, and the tech sector. We are also, it's very clear to us that 20% of gold comes from artisanal small-scale gold miners. And it's really very important for us to engage with Pure Earth, Alliance for Responsible Mining, and AMATAF to be able to source that gold. So we don't see it as simply as cut and dry as recycled gold being the more ethical choice, artisanal gold being the more ethical choice. They have their complexities. It's hard for us as a brand to scale into small scale artisanal gold like from AMATAF. But we are trying to establish those supply chains so that the jewelry industry as a whole can benefit from this.
Thank you for that.
Actually, why don't I show some visual examples of, you just spoke about illicit versus legal or formal and formalizing. Let me show some visual examples of illicit mining. So it was challenging because we were advised not to take any photos of the illicit criminal miners in the deforested areas. So this is a very limited video. But essentially what you're seeing, what I saw with these illicit camps were, 4 tree trunks and a black plastic tarp thrown over it to make a tent, which effectively functioned as both shelter, probably a kitchen. Not sure how they're getting food out there. No services such as bathrooms or showers. And because these miners are occupying these concessions or this land illegally, they have no motivation or incentive or interest to clean up after themselves. So you oftentimes see burned out oil barrels, abandoned and rusting motorcycles, and the trash that they left behind, because why do they need to take out the trash? It's not their land. They don't care, right? And this is really starkly contrast with the AMATAF mines. As soon as you enter the AMATAF mine, you are welcomed by a very large banner with their name. They proudly display their concession number, their license number, right? Which is saying, I am a legal mine. And then suddenly, as you enter it, the rainforest comes back. You're exiting the deforested area, rainforest comes back. You're overwhelmed by the green, the darkness, the dampness, the moisture, and then rainforest comes back in full stereo, all the bird life, insect life, etc. The camps themselves have full services, dormitories, bathrooms, showers, 3 meals cooked a day, football fields, etc. And one real obvious difference between formal miners, the formal AMATAF miners and illicit miners, is the use of PPE. Obviously, personal protective equipment is important in their day-to-day functions, but they continued to wear their PPE even when we were out doing reforestation projects. And I think that's because they are really trying to say very clearly and out loud, we may be in the same industry going after the same raw material, but we are not the same. Okay, this is us. You can clearly see us in our orange gear. We are not the same as those illicit miners over there. And one of the other social impact stories that I heard while I was there was that I was speaking to Ruth from Alliance for Responsible Mining. We're talking about bookkeeping and payroll records and their, small scale miners' understanding of all of this. And she mentioned the 5 types of social insurance. And that's Vilma right there with her husband Luis. And Ruth said the AMATAF mines actually didn't know that they had to pay the 5 types of social insurance previous to the certification. So that's healthcare, accident, injury insurance, life insurance, retirement, and then healthcare benefits for their family. And I paused, kind of nervous to hear what Ruth's response was going to be to my question. And I asked, how did they respond to have to make that investment? And Ruth very quickly responded and said that they were happy to make the investment because they knew that if anything had happened to their employees, their miners, they would have to take care of them because they see them as family. And so knowing that they now have this social safety net, they are protected. They're protecting these family members from these accidents. And then this is also, Cristina, actually, I'm going to pause because I'm going off script. And it's your turn to ask me a question.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the environmental aspects because we are talking about Madre de Dios. So I wanted to ask you about that and what jumped out at you as you were, walking around, this concession area. What jumped out at you about that, about this site versus the others that you had passed?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, the miners are required to ecologically close out their concessions when they're done. There's the Peru's not actually monitoring to check for this, just like they're not monitoring for the illicit miners. But Pure Earth has invested an incredible amount of time to train the AMATAF miners in reforestation techniques. And they've really embraced it, not in a small scale way, but in a full-fledged way. I just want to show kind of a side-by-side comparison of the challenges of reforestation in the region. This is a side-by-side comparison of soil health. Here on the left-hand side, you have essentially the black gold of rainforest soil, where you stick a stick in rainforest soil and a tree grows. It's nutrient rich, it's dark, and that's contrasted against the sand of the deforested areas. So a couple things happen here. When you cut off that canopy of the rainforest, the sun the earth is now exposed to sun that it's not used to being exposed to, right? So that strips away some of the nutrients. But the canopy also protects the soil from the rains, the really heavy rains that are associated with a rainforest, and then nutrients are washed away from the soil because they don't have that level of protection. Coupled with mercury use, stripping the nutrients from the soil, you have a really challenging environment to be able to grow a sapling. And we visited Linda Dos, which is the concession that set up their own sapling nursery. That's Don Hugo's concession. And they actually were trained to develop biochar, which is a soil amendment that they mix in to the holes where they plant the saplings. Because you can't just simply stick a sapling in the ground, water it, and expect it to grow. It really needs, because of the soil quality or the sand quality here, it really needs a lot of assistance. So this is a picture of a miner at Linda Dos. I wanted to kind of show you guys what commitment and action look like. When we arrived at Don Hugo's Linda Dos, we all stood around very formally and everybody gave welcome speeches. And Don Hugo, even though, we call him Don Hugo, he's not really much of a don. He's actually very bashful and very shy. But it was important to him to give a small speech to thank Brilliant Earth and Pure Earth for the support to be able to achieve the certification. But when he did this, when he said this speech, he always did it with his eyes down and almost at the brink of tears. It was really very moving, but it was also contrasted with his very enthusiastic young miners, this being one of them. So with tons of enthusiasm, when they were given the opportunity to speak, they had all this confidence, tons of eye contact, and they spoke with tons of energy, not talking about Pure Earth and Brilliant Earth, but thanking Don Hugo for involving them in the reforestation projects. They were so happy to be involved in that aspect of the work. And again, you could see Don Hugo, bashful, almost at the brink of tears, receiving these compliments directly from his miners. And when I spoke to these individuals, this one in particular, I asked him separately in a conversation, like, why do you enjoy doing this work? Like, why do you, why is it important for you to reforest? And he said to me, he spoke like a conservationist. He said, because I want to leave this place the way it was for future generations. Mm-hmm. And I really left in awe of the social impact of the programs. And that was really clear by the conversations that we had in this really short video here. Rodrigo is actually asking them how many saplings that they've planted. The last one says 250, the middle one says 300, and this first one here says 500 míos. He said 500 are mine. This is not a day job for him. He's not clocking in and out. Those are his saplings. It's part of his life. He wants to see them survive. So it was really very moving.
Yeah, I love when we can highlight people in the supply chain. It's one of my, it brings me great joy when we can talk about them, because the consumer rarely hears about them, and I think we need to do that more. So this brings me a lot of joy. Can I ask you though, is this kind of restoration work, is this part of the Fair Mind standard itself?
The reforestation projects are through the Pure Earth grant, and that's why it's so key that these two organizations are involved here, right? Pure Earth has been in Madre de Dios for a really long time, doing the mercury-free mining trainings, doing the reforestation trainings, helping the Don Hugo set up those sapling nurseries and teaching them to monitor to see how reforestation is going. So they're working on that capacity building beginning section, and they also were really key and integral in helping the 4 AMATAF mines get the Fair Mine certification. And then the Fair Mine certification portion is the downstream supply chain portion. That's the verification, helping them set up the supply chain to get the gold into Fair Mind chain of custody gold supply chain, so that brands like Brilliant Earth can actually purchase that gold, send back that market signal to the AMATAF miners to let them know that they should continue to be producing their gold responsibly as they are. So it's the collaboration between the two organizations is really key, and it's key at different points in the full supply chain.
And I'll just say that just because something is written in a national law doesn't mean it actually happens in practice. So, so it's actually really critical for follow-up to be done, and that support to be done by, miners associations or nonprofits or whoever it is, community groups, to actually make sure that's being done. And it sounds like these miners are motivated personally, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
But to have that actual support being funded by Brilliant Earth to make sure it happens, that is that's amazing. And that's wonderful to hear about that Brilliant Earth's customers are paying for that. And that's what happens when, like, you're buying the right brand, you're paying for that. You're paying to make sure that happens, which as a consumer, that'd be really heartening for me.
Yeah, when they purchase Fair Mine Gold, they are participating in this program. Yes.
Yeah, and I think for other jewelers on the call, for your own customers, if you want to have them also have that kind of reassurance that people are making sure this happens. Fair Mind is what you buy. Regular gold, you don't have that kind of assurance that people are following up. Fair Mind, you have that guarantee. People are following up. You have people like this that are motivated to pursue that kind of standard. So and then if you want to be extra sure, you have these kind of philanthropic programs to fund groups like Pure Earth. So brava. I'd like to bring in Rodrigo from Pure Earth, Rodrigo Velarde from Pure Earth. He is a country director based in Lima, and he's a biologist by training. I'd love him to speak more about Pure Earth's reforestation projects and some of the differences in landscape recovery between fair mines operations and the non-fair mine operations in this region. So Rodrigo, over to you.
Hello, Cristina. Hello, Allison. Thank you for having me here in this great opportunity to share our experience. I would like to mention again something that Allison previously said, which is the importance of developing workshops. During the project, we have workshops about biodiversity. We have workshops about ecology, about reforestation. And those were taken so personal for this group, which is amazing. And I think that's why Allison get so many thoughtful answers to her questions, because they actually get all the information that we share with them, and they interiorize it and make it their own. And they actually understand and believe what we were saying about how to manage the impacts that the industry creates. Let's be clear, they are miners. They are gonna have some kind of impact. But I think it's important for them to recognize those impacts and know how to manage them. And I think that with this project, we are starting to accomplish that. There is also some technical part about the reforestation, because this is part of the tenors of the mines, that they decide that they're not going to exploit anymore in that area, and they're going to reforestate that. So that's something really, really interesting. Let's say that all these concessions are formal. So they have an environmental instrument that they have presented to the government in order for them to operate there. But let's be honest, there's not enough enforcement to monitor all the things or all the commitments that they put over there. So in order to mention about the reforestation, is this part of the whole view of the project, because we are also reforestating to turn back the environment and return it as soon as possible as it was supposed to be. And also because there are so many research that mention that the forest can capture mercury, can capture the emissions. So in order for us to do like the technical part, we're doing for capturing mercury and also for promoting and incorporating biodiversity tasks, like for example, promoting biological corridors. Because the reforestation, when they go to an area and they start exploring that area, they leave like really huge patches that they are not allowed, for example, for small mammals to move. So these patches that they are recreating with the reforestation are being held as local corridors, which is really important to keep and maintain biodiversity. And we have seen that these new patches that we're creating are now being used by large mammals and by birds, which is like the impact in some part is being mitigated. So it's really important. We're doing the reforestation in an ecological part, but also in a social part, because the miners believe in that. So that's really, really important, Cristina.
Thank you. So stay ready, because we have some questions coming in. And so we'll switch to the questions in about 5 minutes. I think one of my last questions for you, Allison, is You know, again, it's like one of these like difficult questions, right? Many would say that Peru's Amazon rainforest is the most precious place that you could possibly choose to engage. Why is it responsible? Why is it actually responsible to source gold there?
I mean, I can contest. It is beautiful, and it is precious, and it was heartbreaking to see what I saw. But the World Wildlife Federation Impact of Gold report calls for courageous collaborations with artisanal small-scale gold miners to help them develop responsible gold practices. And we as an industry, as a jewelry industry, need out-of-the-box thinking of how we're going to develop new alliances and build these responsible supply chains. And this interaction here with Alliance for Responsible Mining, Pure Earth, the AMATAF miners, and the Fair Mine certification is an example of how us as a jewelry brand, not being all the way on the ground in Madre de Dios, but us as a jewelry brand, how we can fuel those responsible supply chains and how we can how we can support sustainable livelihoods on the ground. So as a brand, we are going to first start off by purchasing the Fair Mine credits from the AMATAF miners for the responsible gold that they produced in the last year under their certification. So that's the Fair Mine credit program. They receive the Fair Mine premium paid back to them. So they receive that clear market signal that, yes, continue doing what you're doing. Jewelry brands want this. We as a brand will also be participating in Alliance for Responsible Mining's brand membership model because it's really important to have a stakeholder group for small scale gold miners represented in the jewelry industry. We will continue to have our Fair Mine Gold for Good collection, which is the chain of custody gold. So all different types of ways of engaging with Alliance for Responsible Mining. And our current AMATAF grant with Pure Earth is coming to an end next year, but we are kicking off a new grant with Pure Earth, again, focused on mercury-free mining techniques, reforestation, and commercialization, but this time working with the Women's Mining Network of Madre de Dios. Vilma Contreras, the president of AMATAF, is a member of that, because it turns out that 30% of concession holders, legal concession holders in the region are female. And so we want to be able to engage with them. And I'm asking other jewelry brands to come to me if you want to learn more about any of those opportunities. Excuse my invite reminder there. If we have engage with Fair Mine in so many different ways, whether it's chain of custody gold, whether it's Fair Mine credits, whether it's through direct sponsorship of Fair Mine certifications to miners, through the brand membership model. If you are interested in learning how, as a brand, what fits best with your business model, I'm happy to share how to implement those from a jewelry brand perspective. So please reach out to me. And I'm really encouraging not just jewelry brands, but also financial institutions to start considering purchasing Fair Mine certified gold, as well as the Olympics for those gold medals, please. And before we move to questions, I do think it's one key point, Rodrigo, if you could jump back in and talk more about collaboration with the miners and that trust factor that Franz and Sophie really built with them.
Sure, Allison. And again, I would like to go back to your PPT when you start sharing all the information from Madre de Dios, which is really accurate. But you can get the idea that over there, no one's want to do the things in the right way. But actually, there are people that want to do. And that's why we start working with Vilma Contreras, the president of AMATAF, because she shared the view that Allison, Cristina, Pure Earth mentioned, that it's possible to be formal and to work without mercury. So how important is to have all these actors in the same table and share a vision? With that, you can start building a relationship based on trust, because we all share the same goal, which is really important. And again, with that shared goal, you share a vision, you start trusting each other. And that's really, really important for these kind of projects. And now that we're gonna finish this project, AMATAF is gonna turn into a local hub so that we can share the history, we can share about our work, we can share about the day-to-day anecdotes or the day-to-day things that happens to them. And we're going to translate them to this new work group of stakeholders, which is the Women Network, that we are hoping to build these relationships and make them better and take these women, this group of women, to the next step, which is working without mercury, reforestating, mitigating their impacts, and they can bring to the table a product that you guys appreciate and can make them feel important and can make them feel relevant, because it's really important for the miners to have a space like this that actually acknowledge the work that they are doing, because they're trying to do the good things, you know, and it's important to have a recognition, and it's way better to have it an international recognition that saying, hey, you're doing the things in the good way and we're going to help you. So building trust with our stakeholders, it's a key.
Yeah, I think that recognition is really important. You know, this is Franz right here. He mentioned on a call we were on a couple weeks back, and somebody asked, like, these are very nice miners. What about other miners? Why do we feel like these miners are representative of change? And Franz's reply was, you know, it's been nearly 20 years, 2 decades, right, since the '08 crisis, and like they are sick of the bad reputation of being people who are devastating the region. There are miners, like I said, who are in it, invested for the long term. Vilma is an example. She's brought her whole family. Her daughter and her son both have their own concessions, right? This is a family business. And they don't want to be associated with the bad reputation of the miners. They want to be different. And the Vilmas of the world are being presented in, you know, Amazonian trade fairs as an example of responsible mining, and that recognition is really powerful to them. So I think that we are seeing a sea change here with some of the miners and their openness to participating in responsible gold chains, because they want that distance from the illicit miners.
So we're going to move to the chat. Thank you all for your patience as we kind of navigated technology. So I'm going to bring 2 questions together. One is from Christine and one's from Dorothy. And I think they're related. So one asks about ways that we can promote Fairmind, because she's noticing that Fairmind is not really selling with consumers. And you know, how can we promote the story better? What are ways that part can actually happen? Because we can't scale unless that happens, right? And then the other part, the other question is, I think, from Christine, which is saying, okay, how can we scale this amazing work? And so those two questions are related, right? How can we get more sales? And then how can we scale? So yep. I know some jewelers have decided just to default to Fairmind, saying, you know, I believe in this so much that my default setting on my website will just be Fairmind. And then the other option will be certified post-consumer recycled gold. And those are the 2 options. Thanks very much. And I'm not going to work with other gold because I think it's ridiculous. Or I don't believe in it. That's one way to handle it. Other ways, what are other ways that that you've seen, Allison, or that maybe our Fairmind colleagues can come on, that are ways to promote this so that we can scale this kind of work?
Yeah, I won't deny that it is that the Fairmind collection is challenging, because there is a Fairmind premium paid on top of the gold to the miners, right, for that fair trade price. We are working with exploring other Fairmine certified refiners to try and get the overall price down so that it's less stark for consumers who want to participate in Fairmine. We scaled the pieces into more common things such as wedding bands and engagement rings so that a customer who's not necessarily looking for Fairmine but loves that style is going to purchase it anyways. But agree that there's a cost consciousness aspect, but I think it's too early to say that people aren't willing to buy it. Look at organic cotton in apparel, look at organic produce, right? Look at vegan products, right? People are willing to pay more money, but when you're interacting with your customers in a much more sparse way, right? It's a piece of fine jewelry. It's a considered purchase. You don't have a lot of opportunity to interact with them. It's not retail entertainment like apparel. People are buying clothes every weekend. And so you have touch points to be able to educate them. We need to be able to educate our customers better about the importance of Fairmind and what happens when they purchase the product. So I think that there's that one key to try and increase sales. And then you said something else, Cristina, something about scaling more mines.
Mm-hmm.
And I think AMATAF, like Rodrigo mentioned, is really that model. They're this model now that we're putting forth to the region, using them as a model for the women's mining network and showing them as we establish the supply chain to be able to purchase the AMATAF gold, showing others, hey, we've set up the supply chain for you. This is what happens when you participate in the standard. This is the Fairmine premium that you get paid. This is the recognition that you get. This is that for that sense of self-worth that like you are producing responsible gold. And Vilma will wear her vest everywhere. And on the back, it says, creating responsible gold supply chains. And they wear that with pride. So I definitely think that others are looking at them and thinking, how do I join this movement?
The next question comes in from Anna, who I know well, and it was liked, so I'm going to make sure to ask it. I think it goes to you, Allison. She thanks us for clarifying the difference between illegal and informal. But she notes that Allison used the word illicit, and so she was wondering if there's a reason that you chose that word, because she notes that it's typically associated with things like the drug trade or the weapons trade. Is there a reason that you chose that word? And can you talk about some of the dynamics in the Madre de Dios region? Are those things happening? There's another question that was asking those questions too.
Yeah, they are absolutely happening in that region. And like I mentioned, I snuck that video in, which didn't include any illicit miners, but we were cautioned not to film any of the illegal miners at all for our own safety and to steer clear. And in fact, the AMATAF miners, I think I heard them say the same, they just pass each other on the route, don't stop, so Brilliant Earth recently joined the Amazon Gold Working Group, and there was a lot of discussion about broadening or having different categories of definitions and not the illegal, legal, formal, informal, because like you said, Cristina, you can be trying to formalize and on your way to legality or formalization, but you're not an illicit miner, you're not participating in drug trade or terrorism. So how do we separate out those people? And in Peru, and specifically, the mining license is tailored to medium-sized to large-scale mines. So it's a real-life challenge for the miners to be able to become formalized. And so while they're informal, they shouldn't be called illegal. And while they're informal, they shouldn't be called illicit. So how do we break that down? And that's my attempt to kind of tease out the different actors in the region.
Yeah. And one question from Paula. She asks, what is the responsibility? This is maybe you can go to Rodrigo too. What is the responsibility of refiners in countries like Switzerland, the tech industry who use gold, and other major gold buyers in paying for this stuff and paying for like this destruction? that's happening, and paying for this transition to clean production. What's happening there? And why, are they paying for it, and are they engaging?
I mean, I would say that, is it the carbon tax model? So there are opportunities if refiners would like to participate for this transition. There are opportunities for them to invest in the menu of options, like the grants that we have with Pure Earth. They can sponsor shaking tables. They can sponsor the mercury-free mining trainings. They can sponsor reforestation. They can purchase the Fair Mine Gold, all forms of engagement. So what's their responsibility? I mean, I think that's a bigger question just in general. I think as environmentalists, we're all asking, what's the responsibility as a consumer of plastics, right? Like when I buy a bag of potato chips, what's my responsibility with that plastic bag? So I think that's a really difficult question, but I would say refiners, if you're interested in sponsoring any of these programs, shaking tables, trainings, reforestation, buying the supply chain gold, the Fair Mine Gold, please reach out. Happy to talk you through that.
Yeah, I have an answer as well, but Rodrigo, you go first.
Well, I think it's a really tricky question, and I don't want to be or generate any conflict, but I mean, the gold has a history behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're commercializing gold, you need to know the backstory. So you can choose, or you can look aside, or you can actually take responsible or make responsible for your own decisions. So I think everyone can choose any of those options.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think that everyone wants to buy gold that have a really clean and responsible history. So I think we start digging in that. And yes, join us and help us to promote more responsible mines in the Amazon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should note that the Swiss Better Gold Initiative exists. They do terrific work, and there are a number of Swiss companies that are a part of it, and it is funded by the Swiss government. But there's a number of Swiss companies that are not a part of it, that should be. So to point that out, and there's always more work to be done by other companies, and they could always do more. The Swiss companies could do more. Swiss Better Gold is a terrific program. I think, supporting groups like ARM, the Alliance for Responsible Mining, who run the Fair Mine program, like Pure Earth, who walk hand in hand with these miners, who work with them on achieving these standards, who work with them on following up on these environmental obligations. That's another way, tangible way to actually, make this kind of change. These are all ways that jewelers can, do their part, industry associations can do their part, manufacturers can do their part. And I want to point out that there are ways for all the jewelers on this call to buy Fair Mine gold in the U.S. Riva is in the chat right now. They have Fair Mine chains.
We buy our
also
Fair Mine chains from them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
and
you,
also
Riva. Thank you, Ted.
Hoover and Strong out of Virginia. They also supply Fair Mine gold in the U.S., although I know this is an international call, so the U.S. is not the world. I guess just to wrap up, I'm going to use the moderator's privilege and ask about women in mining, because that's my favorite topic. Allison, we're going to go over a little bit over time, but can you update us on women mine gold in Peru, and how can I buy that
Now,
as soon as possible?
Thanks. I'll go as fast as possible. We're super excited about the next grant, which is focused on the Women's Mining Network of Madre de Dios. We think that, like I mentioned, we're actually seeing a high percentage of title holders who are women in the region. And we also think that the conversation about mercury and health may be more easier heard by the women and passed on along to their families. So we're excited to do a very similar program that we did with the AMATAF mines, but this time focused on the Women's Mining Network. And I'll let Rodrigo expand a little bit more.
Yes, thanks. And really quick, we're going to have 4 objectives. The first one is going to tackle the thing that just Allison mentioned, which is mercury and health. We're going to have workshops with key stakeholders in order to communicate to them directly the harms and how can they avoid and some kind of good practices. Then we're going to work with the state or how we're going to create a baseline for this network to see in talking about their own companies or their own brands, how they are right now and what they need to do the next step for commercializing gold internally or externally, depending on what they want. And then we're going to have all the part of environmental impact assessments, focusing on reforestation. And we're going to have some nice plots over there. And it's really important to mention that we use native species over there. That's something that I forgot to mention, so sorry about it. And the 4th objective will be tackling the commercialization part, acknowledging what are the limitants and how can they generate and cover the gaps and start getting into the market.
Thank you, everyone. I'm delighted that so many people joined us for the live session. This is being recorded, so I will leave it to our friends at Fairmind and ARM to do a follow-up email to talk about how people can access the recording. Thank you so much for our special guests at Pure Earth and Brilliant Earth, and at ARM for hosting this session to give us a better view of the dynamics in Madre de Dios and how all of us can play a part. So thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks for your time.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Allison. Thank you,
Thank you.
Rodrigo. Thank you, Cristina, as well, for sharing your incredible experience and expertise with us today. And yes, we'll make sure to send the recording in the next Fairmind newsletter so everyone can check it out. Okay.
Great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any question,